Hey, thanks for joining us here on 9 News Plus. I'm Chris Beyond here with Marshall Zelinger, our 9 News political guru. Everything to do with politics here. And by the way, brand new father. Congratulations, Marshall.
Thank you. I like how you call me guru and then father, as though I'm like, which compliment should I take for? No.
Well, in this context, your primary title is politics guy.
Yeah.
But in life, your primary title is father and husband.
You're right. Everything with a new lens now. Except for politics. It still comes out. I can still research everything the same.
Back just in time for the midterms. How about that, Marshall?
We planned it that way. Looked at the calendar, like an athlete that's, when can I have a baby that's not going to impact the Super Bowl? That's kind of, we did not do that. It just, we got lucky.
Yes. Well, congratulations on a serious note. We're all happy for you. Want to kind of course transition over to some of the big political things, in case you are unaware, not those hordes of political ads reminding you that the election is coming up on November the 8th. Mm-hmm. I think top line takeaway here in the state of Colorado, of course, we've got a gubernatorial election with incumbent Jared Polis running against Heidi Ganahl. How does that race stand? And honestly, Polis appears to be in a fairly strong position at this point, doesn't he?
Financially, sure. Popularity, I guess. Recognition, yes. And from television ads, yes. Starting the week of October 10th, Heidi Ganahl is going to be on TV with political ads, including on 9 News. So starting that week, October 10th moving forward, at least for the first week, I have to look at our what we have access to see, but Heidi Ganahl is finally going to have her own paid-for ads from a candidate perspective. Jared Polis has had his ads out, I think, for a month now. Then you've got those third-party ads that are paid for by Washington, D.C., or in Heidi Ganahl's case, Steve Wells, this wealthy rancher in Weld County who is funding some Heidi Ganahl ads and negative Jared Polis ads, and I believe some negative Phil Weiser ads at the same time. So to the original question, the incumbent, as Polis is the incumbent, he's got name recognition, he's got the 4 years to reflect on, and he's got money both fundraising and self-funding.
So that probably puts him, initially, again, based on the polling I'm seeing here as of mid-October, it seems that he's in a fairly strong position at this point. Is that how you would characterize it? Or how would you characterize it?
I don't like to talk about frontrunners and whatnot, but I shouldn't even say but. I don't like to talk about frontrunners, so I personally don't think I'll ever say like such and such, or if there's multiple candidates, the frontrunner is so-and-so. When we go into the Denver mayoral's race, please keep me honest about that, where I don't try to say frontrunner. Polis, from the policy standpoint, I think has been more specific than we have heard from the Republican candidate Heidi Ganahl. They've got a similarity on income tax. They both would like to see the income tax rate at 0, although the governor, Polis, has never said, I'm doing this and here's how we're doing it. He's kind of teased with it and said it's going to come down incrementally, whereas I know Heidi Ganahl, I asked her about, she's got this plan to get the income tax rate to 0, but if you do that, there's a giant gap of money that the state no longer has. So the question is, what are you cutting, or how are you filling that? And I was told there's a lot of waste, but I wasn't told specifically where that waste is. I know that the governor has created a lot of new offices, like the Office of Saving People Money on Healthcare, like that kind of thing. So I don't know, if she had mentioned there's a lot of offices and employees that maybe we don't need. So is that really hundreds of millions of dollars of salaries? Because that seems like but anyways, the point is the specifics. And so if the challenger, Ganahl, could be more specific about what she thinks is wrong and how specifically she's going to change that, and not just how she wants to change it, but how she could do it with a legislature that's likely going to be at least one half Democratic, perhaps still fully Democratic, because you're only going to get bills that filter through one chamber that's Democrat, or perhaps both chambers that's Democrat. So you have to be realistic with the voters. Not just I want recess for every period of the school day. It's cool to hear that, but okay, how are you really going to do that?
Right, and that seems to be, at least legislatively or in terms of policy, one of her challenges. I guess when you take a look at Polis versus Ganahl, how would you, any sort of distinct ideas aside from income tax that set the that Ganal may be kind of latching onto to try and attack Polis? Yeah.
I mean, you hear any Republican candidate right now is focused, and they've been doing this for more than a year now, crime, inflation, cost of living, things like that. And so they try to tie that specifically to the governor. And there are some very specific things that you could reference to Governor Polis about the gas tax, the gas fee that's being added to every time we go to the pump. Now it's going to be in April. It was supposed to happen already, but it got delayed by the governor. So the governor signed something that was going to raise our gas fee 2 cents per gallon and then delayed that. So like that kind of thing. But that, even though he delayed it, he didn't delay the other part of that bill that added the delivery tax. So there's I keep saying tax. I know there's a debate depending on where you fall on the political circle, tax versus fee. Taxes have to be passed by voters. Fees can be installed by lawmakers, and these are fees that didn't have to go in front of a vote. But while the gas fee was delayed, the delivery fee, so if you buy something from Amazon or if you buy something from your favorite department store and it gets delivered to you, you're paying 27 cents more than you were before. Or if you're driving a ride share, getting an Uber or a Lyft, depending on if it's electric or gas powered, it's 15 or 30 cents more per ride. Like that didn't get delayed. So from a cost of living standpoint, I can see how Ganal can point to the governor and say, you added this. Now, real quickly on the flip side, that money that's collected from all that goes toward transportation needs. Depends on your definition of transportation. It does not mean pavement. It could mean climate-related transportation issues, pedestrian, bike, things like that. And so you hear you've added to the cost of living, but maybe there are people out there that are like, I'm willing to pay that extra cost if it's going to benefit me in those areas that are going to get funded with that.
Do we have any idea how effective some of those attacks from Ganal have been in terms of upping her standing in this race?
I don't know, and I don't know. The polls that we get, we've not funded. We've done some 9 News polls in the past. We haven't done that this year. They've been done by outside agencies, and I don't know if they've been specific to anything about that.
Okay. And what does, as of mid-October, the polling generally show at this point?
I can't remember the numbers of the last I saw, but a significant victory right now for Polis.
Maybe flipping things over to the senatorial race, it does appear to be a bit more competitive with incumbent Michael Bennet taking on Joe O'Dea, Republican challenger, wealthy business guy here. In Denver, I think O'Dea has a bit more directly tried to placate a bit more towards the center. Correct me if I'm wrong in terms of some of those generalizations, but how would you assess that race?
Well, it depends on where it's close. I think it's much closer than we'd see in the governor's race, just on the surface. But that's in general because Senator Bennett, in his running for Senate the previous times, I had this stat, and I want to say it's either 5 points is the biggest, 5 or 7, I want to say 5 though, is his biggest victory. And you look 6 years ago, I mean, I joke about this, but he faced Republican Darrell Glenn, whose one memorable political ad looked like he was doing a Bowflex commercial. And so, like, if he wins against a candidate that's what the memory is, and he wins by like 5 points, when there's a candidate that is getting more financial backing and perhaps is more centrist, perhaps, it's going to be a close race. That centrist perspective is falling apart depending on what where you fall on this his stance on abortion and when he believes the woman's right to choose versus when he thinks that should no longer exist. It's kind of unraveled a bit because he admitted to voting for the ballot measure that would have restricted abortion after, I think it was, every time I sit with you, I suddenly lose my memory. I think it's 15 weeks is what that, it was either 15 or 20 weeks what that ballot issue was. And then, but he has said he supports a woman's right to choose up to a certain point, and it's somewhere around there. And then he would be okay with it if the life of the mother's at risk, rape, incest. But then there's reporting, and I think it came from the Colorado Sun, that he had signed a petition that would have put an issue on the ballot for more restrictive abortion measures. So it's like, where do you really fall on that? And are you just saying something to appear centrist to win an election? Do you really believe that? If you really believe that, why did you do these things in the past? Did you truly have a shift of mind at a certain point, and what changed your mind? Like, these are things that I'd like to hear from him directly about.
And maybe is it better to say that O'Day has at least more directly attempted to cast himself more in the centrist image than maybe, certainly even Ganal?
Oh, if we're going to compare to Ganal, sure, yes. Because, Joe O'Day is running by himself, but Heidi Ganal, we broke the news about Danny Moore, her lieutenant governor pick. We broke the news a year ago about his election-denying stance, which cost him his role as leader of the redistricting commission that helped redraw the maps of the state House and Senate districts. That was like a pivotal moment for knowing, like, she makes that selection. Like, we know this is his history, and if you're going to tie yourself to someone who had this in history, are you trying to move to the center, or are you still on the far right area where people believe that something was nefarious with the 2020 election? Haven't heard that from Joe O'Day. So if we're making that comparison, just between the two, for sure.
The furries thing. I think Ganal's kind of given, is it safe to say, some kind of winky winks more to the more fringe side of the Republican Party?
Certainly not topics in my discussions with people who are in politics and run campaigns and have insight. Certainly these are not topics that would tend to attract an unaffiliated voter or perhaps a Democratic voter who's looking for something different. So yes, Ganal still on the fringe perhaps, O'Day in comparison more toward the middle.
And does that, Michael Bennet, you mentioned how Polis financially, favorability ratings may have a leg up on Ganal. Does Michael Bennet, as an incumbent, have the same advantage?
Oh, financial for sure, because basically you become a senator, and there's a good chunk of your time that is fundraising. And so I don't know what the number is, millions of dollars in his account, cash on hand, things like that allow him to do the political ads, that allow him to put out mailers, things that get the attention of people. And then even if he were to lose or win, and then at the end of his time as a senator, he'd still have this pot of money that could then fund other people's campaigns. Our colleagues, I know Chris Vanderveen was part of something, and some other colleagues within our ownership group of Tegna have done stories on what happens to campaign funds once the senator isn't, or the congressperson is no longer in office. But yeah, it's a lot of money that you've collected over 12 years. So from that standpoint, he definitely has a leg up.
Is Michael Bennet, is it safe to say, maybe a bit more of a lower key? I feel like you hear a fair bit more about, for example, John Hickenlooper, who's, of course, the junior senator here in Colorado, and Jared Polis. Maybe that's because he's governor, but I do feel like maybe you don't hear quite as much about Michael Bennet. Is that a safe characterization? And does that, and you mentioned he didn't get to 50% in either of his two elections.
Well, he ran for governor, or he ran for president, I should say. So are you low-key if you ran for president? His big thing, I know, is the child income tax credit that I don't think is fully still in existence or will be. I know when the president comes on October 12th to designate Camp Hale a national monument, that's something that he'll tag on to, both as someone who's been a proponent of that and also, we're 4 weeks from the election, thanks for coming, President, because that gave me a quick boost. So quiet during, I don't know, like, I've always found Congress and what happens in the House and the Senate to be very confusing to put my hand on and be able to tell you this is how this directly impacted you versus what happens at the state capitol. I can tell you anytime a bill is going on at the state capitol how you will directly be impacted by that. It's much more difficult in Congress, and so maybe it's a failure of me to be able to connect and say, your people, Bennett, in D.C., are doing this or trying to do this or are not doing this, and here's how that impacts you. Maybe that's why I might say, yeah, he's a little quiet, but also it's not like he hasn't been doing anything.
For sure. Well, let me finish up the senatorial talk by saying you mentioned that it appears to be closer than perhaps at this point, appears to be closer than the gubernatorial race. Is it close, or is it just closer between O'Day and Bennett?
I don't know. I think it's, given the history of that race, it's just generally going to be close. And I don't know if there's enough out there that would say, oh, it's close enough that, man, keep an eye on the results on election night because we may have a new senator. I just don't know if it's to that point or not.
Okay, and we'll obviously find out on November the 8th. Turning things over to congressional races, we've got one certainly interesting one in the new congressional district, the 8th congressional district, which I believe is parts of Weld and Adams counties. Do you mind giving us a bit of an overlay about how congressional races, I mean, of course CDA will be the main one to watch for.
Well, this one is getting national attention because it could help sway who controls the House in Washington, D.C. It may not matter on this one, but this is the one new seat that could become, like, Democrats are like, we'll take anything we can get. Republicans are like, if we can get an additional seat that would flip it from Nancy Pelosi control to Kevin McCarthy control, like, this could be that seat. So you've got Barb Kirkmeyer, state senator, Republican, former Weld County commissioner, Yadira Caraveo, Democrat, current state representative, and a pediatrician running for this brand new seat. That is 40%, when it was created, 40% Latino population. So not only do you have this new seat in a mix of urban-rural Colorado, suburban and rural Colorado, but you also have a population that probably feels underrepresented. And both from the Latino population, and then you've got the oil and gas industry and the rural, the farmers that feel perhaps that they're underrepresented based on the makeup of the people who are in Congress. Like, hey, you don't look like me. You're not a farmer. You're not like that kind of thing. So here we've got these two candidates that this one's definitely going to be close, both based on the types of voters that you'll have and the makeup of the voter registration. Democrats have a slight edge in Congressional District 8. But unaffiliateds are the largest pool, and that's true of every district basically. So it's the unaffiliated voter. If you assume that you're going to get everyone in your pot, or most everybody in your pot. So if it went all the makeup, Democrats versus Republicans, you need a few 10,000 or more unaffiliateds to sway Republican for the Republicans to win. This one definitely could be close, 50-50.
And I believe it's considered to be a toss-up race by most of the main election groups out there. There's also the 7th Congressional District where Ed Perlmutter is retiring. Maybe there have even been some rumblings that Lauren Boebert's district, the 3rd Congressional District, could be competitive. Thoughts on other ones?
Congressional District 7, which 9 News is having a debate with that one, as well as Congressional District 8. That one is a little more in the Democrats' advantage in terms of voter registration makeup. Again, unaffiliated voters make up the majority of voters in that district as well. So again, if Democrats all vote for the Democrat, or the majority of them do, and Republicans all vote for Republicans, the Republicans need to overperform in the unaffiliated turnout to get a victory there. And it's a brand new drawn district, so it's a little more Park County, a little more of the mountain areas and less of suburban west part of the metro area, which is what Ed Perlmutter had been representing. Now it's the west part of the metro area, a little less of it, and then into the mountains. So it'll be interesting to see the voter turnout on that. I'm not convinced, honestly. Congressional District 3, if you look at the voter registration, high Republican voter registration compared to Democrats. Whatever your thoughts are on Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, the people who elected her 2 years ago, I don't think are bothered by what they have received from her so far. And so until she loses the people who put her in office, I feel like that's going to be her seat to keep, unless something dramatic changes. I know there's this recent poll that says Adam Frisch, the opponent's within like 2 points. I just, if that's true, that's I don't like to predict, but it just seems from a voter registration standpoint and a voter turnout standpoint, I just don't know how it's that close, if that's true.
I'll say that the 3rd Congressional District was also redrawn to make it a bit more Republican-leaning in the most recent voter redraw. Ballot measures, big one statewide, what do we watch for there?
Income tax reduction, which is Proposition 121, and then 123 is, I think, I should have brought my blue book over with me, but 123 is it's spending some of the income tax on, I can't remember what it's getting spent on. This is
I actually
bad
don't
for a political reporter. While we're here. But anyway, the ones that deal with your pocketbook. The bottom line is it's what deals with your pocketbook. I want to say it's the healthy foods one, but I know I'm wrong on that. 121. Oh, do you have the
Investing in affordable housing.
housing? Okay, so you've got 121, which would reduce your income tax rate from 4.55 to 4.40. And a quick caveat, even though it's 4.55 because of Tabor refunds, it gets temporarily knocked down to 4.50. So it's already reduced because we're getting Tabor refunds. If you reduce the income tax, as we talked about earlier with Heidi Ganahl's idea to get it to zero, that means less money for the state. So is the state cutting? Is the state getting money somewhere else that it didn't anticipate getting money from? Or does that mean in Tabor refund years, like are projected over the next 3 years, maybe we're not going to get a Tabor refund anymore because the state hasn't gone over the limit because it's just not collecting as much, which means we're saving incrementally ahead of time, and we're not getting that overage refund after the fact because the piggy bank didn't fill up enough. 123, which is the income tax for affordable housing, would dedicate money specifically from income tax to fund affordable housing needs. And if you're reducing the income tax rate in 121, and then 123 then says, with that reduced amount of money, here's how much some of that has to go to, it could get a little tricky there. So I think because they both impact money, those are ones I'm watching for, and the healthy foods, which I think is Proposition GG, which would fund making sure people aren't going to school hungry, and with better foods than what we were used to going to school with. But again, that would come from money that we're paying to the government.
Well, a couple of interesting ones there. Any Denver or metro area ballot measures to watch out for?
In Denver, you've got the first one that's on the ballot is about the library, and it's written in such a language that it's like, what am I really voting? You're basically voting on, does the library needs more money? Do you want to give the library more money? I think it's a property tax impact on that. The psychedelic mushrooms one, actually, sorry, that's a statewide ballot. That would just get you like interested in like, what is this about? So I should say that one for the statewide. And the liquor stuff, I overlooked that one. I'm going backwards now. The liquor stuff, 124, 125, and 126 are the alcohol-related ballot measures. 124 says liquor stores that exist would be allowed more licenses to compete with big box stores, grocery stores, things like that. Because if 125 passes, they will be allowed to sell wine in more locations than they currently can, because currently they can sell beer in all locations, beer, wine, and alcohol in up to 8 locations, and that number goes up over time, over 4 years, until in 2037 it's unlimited. Grocery stores can sell it all. So 124 says, well, hang on, if 125 probably passes, 124 is regular liquor stores should be able to have more than limited locations, so that would increase and follow the same incremental 8, 13, 17, unlimited, something like that for your local liquor store. But I don't know how many local liquor stores could handle 4, 5, 6, 7 locations. Maybe they're clamoring for it, maybe they're not. But if grocery stores can do it, it would definitely get them on a better playing field than they currently are. And 126, again, alcohol related, is about third-party delivery. Right now, you can get alcohol delivered to your home. It's the employee of the restaurant or an employee of the grocery store that has to deliver it to you. This would allow DoorDash, Instacart, Amazon, things like that, to deliver for you. Is that good, bad, otherwise? I mean, depending on your opinion, do you like to get directly food from the restaurant? Are you okay with the third-party apps? I don't know if they increase the price or they take more from the store, things like that. Like, that's where you have to decide your position on that. But those are the 3 alcohol independent issues, but they are all interconnected in a weird way. You asked about the city ballot. The Denver city ballot, I know, has the issue about the library. And then there's that renter fee to landlords that would also fund tenant-related issues. So eviction-related issues, if I'm getting evicted or if I'm facing eviction as a tenant, I could tap into this fund from the city to help defend me, a fund that's paid for by my landlord. And let's be honest, the landlord's passing that on to the tenant. So maybe I'm opining too much, but we all talk about like passing of costs of living, things like that. But this would add a new cost to landlords. The question is, would it add a new cost to tenants, essentially? Would landlords just up the rent $75? So then really the tenant is paying for their own possible defense in the future versus landlords paying for defense of tenants.
Fascinating. Well, I guess with that in mind, any final thoughts about the overarching picture for November the 8th?
I think we'll know most of the results fairly quickly. There's Congressional District 8 will be perhaps into the next day. And just note, like, just because we know the results on election night, they're by no means final. 8 days from election night plus 8 days. If you forgot to sign your ballot, if you signed your ballot and the election judge can't verify that it was really your signature, you can still fix issues like that because the clerk will send you notification and say, there's an issue, your ballot has been received, but it hasn't been counted yet. If you really turned it in, if you really signed it, if you didn't sign it and you want to sign it, fill this thing out and we'll count your ballot. That adds to totals after the fact. Military and overseas voters get their ballots, you can send them in and have them accepted up to 8 days after the election. We have to have ours turned in by election night, but if you're military or overseas, it can be received 5 days after the election and still count. That's not nefarious. So things like that in a close race could change results. For the most part, I think we'll know some of the main races election night. Some of the CD8, perhaps a Secretary of State, perhaps an Attorney General, I don't know. Senate, it could, if it was close, maybe it'll take a day to know for certain. I'm sure some of these ballot issues, there's always one ballot issue that we're like, I don't know how that's going to go, and then the next morning it's like, oh, it flipped. There'll probably be at least one of those.
Okay. And by the way, 9 News will host six different debates. It was originally going to be 7, but
this is a source. Yeah, 6 different debates.
6 different debates
starting October 13th.
Starting October the 13th, featuring this 8th and 7th Congressional District, Senate, Attorney General, Secretary of State, and I'm missing one.
The state treasurer, the one
treasurer.
Everyone's waiting for.
Yeah, how your money is spent by the state of Colorado. But Marshall, we appreciate a few minutes of your time, and thanks for joining us here on 9 News Plus.
Sure thing.